everyone. I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. Every week, photographers from all over the country meet here to connect, inspire, and create. If you'd like to join us, you'll find the schedule for upcoming presentations on my website at lindanickell.com. Every week, a guest shares their tips and insight into their creative journey, and they inspire us to look at a subject a little differently. Tonight's guest is Lisa Merrill. Lisa is a travel and social impact photographer. Her work has been featured in National Geographic Traveler, Smithsonian, Outside, and other magazines, books, and websites. Through her company, Merrill Images, she and her husband, John, offer online coaching, workshops, and photo adventures. You can sign up for their newsletter and connect with them through their website, merrillimages.com. In tonight's presentation, Lose the Literal, Impressionist Photography. Lisa will talk about how you can employ intentional camera movement to purposely add blur and creativity to your long exposure photography. She'll also share some of her favorite tips and techniques to inspire you and jumpstart your own creativity. So welcome to the Happiness Hour, Lisa.
Thank you so much for having me, Linda. It's a pleasure.
Yes, thanks for coming. First of all, where are you based? I know because I like snooped, but do you want to? When I do these intros, I pull what I want to kind of highlight. Sometimes I completely miss something. So if you want to fill in the gaps, feel free to take that opportunity.
I was appreciative. I feel like you did a great job. And that is these days we are doing John. It's funny. Originally, I think you had us as John and Lisa, and then I pulled his name and he was supposed to be rafting and I couldn't do it. And so I'm flying solo. He actually got back last night. So he's actually on Zoom and in here, but I'm flying solo. You'll see a lot of John's images. I think you did a great introduction. I'm just so appreciative that this happiness hour exists. I have been inspired and enjoyed many and have many I want to watch. So thanks for having me.
That I'm happy to have you here.
Yeah.
With that, you want to just jump into your presentation?
I will, because I always do. There's so many names here. Some I know, some I don't. I just want to thank all of you for coming as I share screen. It's my challenge is with John and I do a lot of photo education, but I've never quite had one keep it to an hour or less. And I want to honor your time and also have questions. So I was madly cutting slides from this, which we've done often in a longer format. And it was like my babies to cut. So we will hope that it all flows in the way and we have lots of time for questions, but I do encourage throughout. I mean, it's a small group. If you want to put it in the chat, both Linda and John can interrupt as essential, and then we will make sure. And I am very accessible even beyond this presentation. So. Well, it's I think when Linda and I started talking, we had a variety of topics that we might come on this first time on the Happiness Hour. And Impressionist photography is something that just brings me so much joy lately, and a lot of the people I'm working with. It's been one that's near and dear to my heart. So I am glad. I know that she's had Beth Below and quite a few others who touch on this kind of long exposure motion that we'll dive into today. And I'm going to go and look at the archives, but I watch a lot of photo webinars, especially about this. And as Linda and I were talking beforehand, there's so much to be inspired and just say, wow. And I hope that my goal tonight is to inspire you a few wows and get you out there trying some of these things, perhaps with your own art. So I'll, kind of race through a little bit about me and really get into why you might or might not. I can't ask you all, do the Zoom poll, who's tried this kind of, I'm just going to assume you're showing up and maybe have tried it a little bit, but might want to more. So we'll get into, in 1 hour or less, some techniques and things I find I would look at a lot of these kind of images online and how they do it, and finding out how it is good in the field and a lot of experimental things with motion, and it gets shutter speeds, but we'll get into that. And if I can help you with, ooh, this is a thing I just am going to run out and try, or inside, I am thrilled then, because that's my goal. So, and I'll start with this one, which is my background, because it's just was created on Saturday with after we are lucky in Seattle area to have a big photo store, Glazers, and they had their annual photo fest. And afterwards, I went out with a friend and then on my own to a place I have photographed so often. It's called the Center for Wooden Boats. There's often some colored dinghies on the board, on the dock. And it's funny, I don't know if you've had that, where after so many times photographing, you finally get this one that's like, this is what I love about these. So, and I think this talk was in my head, so I've been doing more of this long exposure in the last week. But, this is my dinghies that really, this is what I'm looking at. And this is my, my both challenge and my encouragement to you. You can see things, even soft light, nothing, no great photo here. And yet for somehow I was entranced for 10 minutes playing with the dinghies. And that's, it's a lot of play. So that's what we'll get into. And John, as I said, is here. He just went to get the doorbell. But we are partners in crime and have been since the film days on the left. That's us in 1994 going on a trip with a lot of film, which was scary to go through the airport scanners and not seeing work. And there we are on the right more recently on an uncruise, a small ship expedition up in Alaska. I'm calling you from Bellevue, Washington, which is right on this hill here. And I'm looking at Lake Washington and then Seattle. And I love it here. I've lived here half my life, New Yorker originally. And, we are very lucky. We're visual people and we have an incredible view. So when we teach at our house, it's like, ooh, we should time it for a sunset. You don't always get this lucky, but 30 years into it, I'm still running for my camera and, repeating and seeing things anew. But nature photography has always been a big part of me. And very much so, in terms of solace and spiritual renewal in tough times. But travel photography and adventure photography is where John and I have done a lot of our commercial work with guidebooks, textbooks, travel catalogs, postcard shots. I like to say, makes you want to be there, like this photograph in Southeast Asia. Somewhere along the line, people photography became part of my life, a joyful of friends and family, but also people I meet when exploring. So moving ahead, though, I always say our photography morphs with our life. And so I'm into rafting. So this would be kind of a use of the kind of photograph I'm going to talk about tonight in this realm of outdoor adventure. And I do a lot of work with nonprofits and love to help other photographers think about ways that you could offer your skills in your own community. I think a lot of us think I need to be a professional to do that. And I'm here to say, no, I mean, a certain level of skill, you'd be amazed what good community groups need in the way of imagery. So that's something else that I'd love to come back and talk, maybe a future happiness hour. But we do a lot of teaching, and you will not see my longer kind of what makes a compelling photo tonight. But these are the subjects I touch upon. And in fact, as you have likely seen a lot of photo webinars or read books, these are pretty common in terms of design or composition, light and moment or gesture. And those, you don't get them all the time, but I'm sure hopeful. And then I talk a lot tonight and about what's in your mind even before all that. But intentional camera movement or impressionist photography holds forth with all of the basics of photography. It really, it's like to me, it's an add-on, a layer, a set, a way, a style that is endlessly fascinating, but I'm still keeping in mind things like composition and light, and in this case, the moment of the tulip harvest. So just want to offer that as we're going to assume photo 101, you have lots of ways to go on your journey. And let's talk about ICM, or intentional camera movement. And this has been around for a while. It feels trendy and new, but John and I know that on our very first photo workshop ever that we attended in 1995 with Brian Peterson, on Whidbey Island, which we teach now, he had us zooming our lens, and it brought, and of a wharf that I love. And it's like, oh, I started that at the very first workshop I ever took. And so it's been part of my life off and on, but lately, and I think truly probably pre-pandemic, but a lot throughout it. It's a source of play and fun. So it's intentionally, if you're new to it, creating blur. So intentional blur. And I'm moving something, either my camera, my lens, usually both, during a long exposure. And we'll get into what's the long exposure and how do you move your camera. And that's where I find it, lots to ponder and lots to try. But a scene like this, a very quiet river scene in Northern California, can be rendered like this, and it really is, to me, there's a lot of uniqueness that happens, a lot of unpredictability and mystery and happy surprises, even when you're intentionally doing this. So you kind of get the unseen as pixels move as you move through the frame with motion. So for me, it's a very soothing and joyful type of photography, and like maybe all photography being more present, to what we're experiencing. But with ICM and Impressionism, you're kind of just having this photo dance and looking at light and shapes and color in a different way than I am when I'm kind of documentary of, everything sharp kind of photography, if that makes sense. So losing the literal is a phrase that I kind of makes me smile. And, it always starts out for me of what do I like here? What's making me pause? What makes me wonder? Is it the light? Is it the repetition of the bridge? Is it the feeling of the crossing and all the symbolism of crossing a bridge here? I have photographed this bridge at our local botanic gardens many times, but using some camera shake and a slow exposure made, for me, created an image that kind of, and it's a happy image. There's light at the end. So this is still a favorite image of mine from this one bridge. So I invite you to kind of try this type of photography with intention and openness and curiosity, visual curiosity, creative curiosity. What happens if I try this? Knowing this is not one where you're going to care about how many are quote keepers. Your ratio is going to go if you're trying this stuff, there's a lot of stuff you're like, whoa, but it's a journey. So being patient with yourself, thank you, and playful. And I think we could all use some more play in our lives. I come from a background of children's museums in part, and I, for years, really hammered into me the power of play for all ages in terms of mental health and, joy. So that's my, David Allen Harvey said, shoot what it feels like. Maybe when I'm in a bus in Japan, what it feels like is this rushing by feeling. So I use probably, I don't know, my camera with a quarter second or so and captured the journey. And so I think those are something to keep in mind. So hopefully you're here because this is of interest. Why explore it? And you're hearing from me. A, it's fun. It leads to all kinds of happy, creative images I bet you'll be happy with, but it's intriguing. For me, it's a learning journey, and it is liberating, I would say, from the pursuit of perfection and sharpness that many of us may have, rightly so, in birds, wildlife, certain landscape genres. I'm all about technique and sharpness. Here, I throw that out the window, and it's much more about mood and color and feel. And I think it's, for me, challenging. I have a high bar of, the kinds of images that thrill me. That's a good thing as we, go through life. So I encourage you to embrace it. I will say many people John and I have taught on our local photo walks in the Northwest or on workshops in different places approach this with some resistance. It's an interesting thing. And then sometimes we'll just try it. And as much through the iPhone or phones, and I can, slow shutter, full disclosure is I would say the best $3 I ever spent in my life for a creativity boost. But whatever your photographic tool is, ICM is very accessible. And when people, sometimes when you try things, you get out of creative ruts or blockages. And that's, I think, exposing ourselves to different things is good. So for me, I use it for artsy photos like this. It's just a tool, a set of tools. Your visual toolbox, if you use this as the Kickstarter for a journey, can be used a lot of ways. So my ICM or Impressionist photos show up in art. Look at that. Someone made a mural of plastic in Telluride. And you walk by a door framed with plastic tchotchkes, and we make crazy art that's kind of from the 60s. So, but it's also for storytelling. And if I have a narrative and I'm talking about trips or travel, this might be an image I would use to convey travel in a kind of a artsy way where we can show mood and time and motion in a different way than a traditional photograph. Or, motion, John and I love to photograph dance. And so all over, we'll do the sharp image, and then we'll say, how can I use motion here and slow shutters to capture some of the excitement that we felt in this case at a performance in Hawaii. And I'm a big believer of, practicing our craft throughout life. Maybe you're just on the way for the grocery store or something, but ICM, you'd be amazed what has become favorite subjects. It really is a group of techniques that you can use anywhere and anytime. And I will show you today a lot of nature photos using these techniques as well as urban. I think when we started out, I did a lot of objects, like here's this, here's this. Now I love to do scenes as much, like the situation, the whole kind of storytelling, wider perspective. You can do this indoors or out. You can do it in lovely light, really like moving light through your frame, but you can also, I find, ICM's forgiving, and you can create images that you might say, this is such challenging light, I can't work here with all this harshness. So we'll look at that. And it really is something you can do with any camera and lens. So that's why I'm a big embrace it and enjoying the thing. Like here we are at a bathroom. I'm going to the bathroom. What could I do here? A few minutes later, I'm ICMing these windows, and I've learned I like glass blocks. Glass blocks are cool. The way you can start both for traditional photos and this. So, or a tent in the upper reaches of a tent at our tulip festival was fodder for some impressionistic interlude in the drying out from the rain in the Northwest, enjoying a latte. I was like, oh, what can we do with these? And I think both John and I photographed these banners without each knowing each other. We would have, but it made sense later when we came together. It's like, oh, I did that. So let's get a little technical. What is that? What do you vary? How do you think about this? For ICM and Impressionist, I use those interchangeably tonight. There's three things you could vary: your shutter speed, what type of movement you're doing and what direction you're moving, and the speed of your movement. So I'm going to show you how that might, impact something as simple as an escalator, as we're moving, just a little jiggle. A little jiggle in ICM goes a long way. And when you dive into it, you're going to play and get some surprises, but you could try to kind of use your scientific method a little bit. Like, instead of changing everything, I'm just going to spend a while at this 1/6 of a second because it's getting me tones I like, and I'll just vary my movement. So I think as you go through it, know that there is both. You can try to predict stuff, but there's always going to be, I think, in a good way, a lot of unpredictable, delightful surprises, and be open to those and maybe try to learn. So what do we use? And settings come up a lot, and I won't be showing them for each image because you will never know how much I moved or my speed of movement. But on the camera side of things, John and I both use shutter priority mode, and a slow shutter these days, usually 1/10 to a second, but sometimes a lot longer, but a half, a sixth of 10. Those are favorites for me these days, depending on the subject. And we'll show some why that matters so much. And then I leave my camera on a beautiful thing called auto ISO. I let the camera do the figuring all that out, and I just know I'm playing here in shutter priority mode and everything else. I will sometimes add a filter, often add a filter to let myself get to that slow exposure. We'll go through that. We happen to use back button autofocus. You could do it either way, and we turn off any stabilization. We have kind of a go-to setting on our cameras that if I think I want to do this in one custom setting, I'm there. You may or may not be able to do that on your camera. And the polarizer, I'm sure you've heard from other photographers a lot with nature, but it does have reasons to use it outdoors where it can help with your sky and your clouds as it changes the way the light comes into your camera and removing sheen on the water. But if we need to get to a slow exposure and we don't have a neutral density, which is more almost preferred in this realm, and our cameras with built-in, we'll use a polarizing. And look at the difference here in the house. I mean, you get some really nice punchy colors midday when you choose to use a polarizing filter. And so we do, depending on our situation, and even in, the sheen on leaves, reflections. But sometimes we need even more light blockage. If I'm outdoors and I want to get to a half a second or a second, I put on a neutral density filter. And this is something that cuts light tremendously. We have 3 and 6 stop. We also have a variable. And when we put that on, suddenly I can do slow, long exposures during the daytime. So these tools were around a lot for like nature photography. Look at how it smoothed out the water there in Puget Sound. But having them opens up a lot of long exposures for creativity. So talk to me after, mention if there's questions now on gear. This is about as much of the gear you could do it without. It gets a little harder if it's bright. In the Olympus Sim system or the OM system, we have something called Live ND, which is like simulating a neutral density. So happy for us that we have that feature, which we use a lot for this creative artsy photography. So let's say you've dialed in your half a second or even a tenth of a second for something like this. This is a plant on my deck. Start with something nearby. A little jiggle, tenth of a second. This is where I'm just going to show you examples where different scenes, but a jiggle at the water can make the water feel like it's moving. So all of these techniques are to be used to what are you trying to say here? What do you like here? And, I'm going to just throw a lot of things at you and hope that, some of them you're inspired to say, huh. I was photographing, what was it? A remote controlled model boat show at a lake near us. And these beautiful little boats were getting the light. So decided to use ICM for me that day that captures that feeling of happy spring and motion. So sometimes subjects are moving, sometimes not. These are icons of Seattle are definitely not moving, but I can add my twist. This is the famous Space Needle around the Calder. Sometimes we find cultural work you can add some interest and mystery, as we were with these longhouses in Alaska. This is a jiggle. So all we're doing on all of these is a little jiggle. I'm going to stop, Linda, and just ask, do you have any questions at all? I should break it.
I do not see any questions. Lots of cool comments, though. A lot of compliments on your photos, but no questions yet.
Okay, well, we'll keep going and hopefully we'll see what engenders. I remember seeing images like this before I ever created one. And I'm a beach girl. I grew up in New York. I was like, ooh. And when I first tried it, it was surprisingly easy overall. Like, I think it's easier to do panning like this than to pan a bike rider or a motorcycle rider in a city scene. Like, because, you're just trying to get smooth without any tripod or anything. I'm moving pretty fast across a Cape Cod beach. And when I was midday, I was like, ooh, this is what I liked. And I realized sometimes I like clouds to be streaked a little bit, not too much, but the colors of the water, right? So panning is different than jiggle. Panning is you're just moving your camera during a slow exposure, maybe horizontally. Let's look, maybe other way. So here's another one of these. Coastal scenes do lend themselves. This happened to be in Hawaii, so a whole different set of, someone ordered this for their beach house and I could see why, and I was happy they did, And some, this is a lake with snow on it in Vermont, but landscapes, there's a whole lot, many photographers I admire, a lot of British photographers who are doing quiet landscapes with ICM and Impressionistic, and you start to notice features of the land as you gently move them and the tonalities of the shore and the ice and the water. These are harder for me. For a while, I was having some struggle with mountains just get a little weird. We have a lot of scenes like this in the Northwest. And then last week or two, I created one I kind of liked. So I'm like, oh, but when you have dark, it can do this ghosting and it's just an interesting thing to notice and to see. But it has a mood that I kind of found I like. So I'm trying to often stretch myself. How would this look? What could I do here? But you may have seen vertical pans, often of beautiful aspen, like John created this one with some curve. And it's a lot about looking for the stand of trees with gorgeous light and color and playing. This is really photo play when you're out in a beautiful stand of aspens doing this kind of work. And it's not, I created this one, it's technically great. Here it is. You really are usually just getting lost in the zen of creativity. Sometimes we'll do a curved pan. So in this case, I was in Japan and these trees really grew this way. And this was with an iPhone, and I just kind of like, boom, tracing the trees. Or pathways will often move with a subject. And so this is still literal. Now we kind of know what we're looking at. Some of our Impressionist work, you've lost the literal. This a little still is some literal. Here, maybe not. I don't know if you know. Any guesses? It really doesn't matter what the subject is in a lot of these, but it's a interesting color cast from a plant, a really kind of a yucca, agave kind of plant. So one thing that helped me when I started watching a lot of webinars, and I've learned so much from Stephanie Johnson and some of the people in the ICM Photo Magazine network and community. But I remember when Stephanie said, ICM pulls light through the frame. And that kind of stuck with me when I see glinties move, or in this case, pipes in a steam plant that we go to. John very seductively and beautifully drew those lights through the frame here. And that has helped me a lot. The other day, I was at a place where there were some lights on the ceiling, and I thought of the same thing here, where it's just kind of you're drawing. If there's pinpricks or glints or white spots in the cloud, if you're moving a little, you're moving them through the frame. Like this is a new sculpture in my community that I love. And, I was very subtle how there's little tiny pinpricks of light, so moving it. Or it can be very dramatic and big, like, wow, the other day, moving a sunset across the lake here in Seattle. So, I think it's, I get goofy. I'm going to just share some goofy stuff here. Like, this is fun to me. When we have this kind, I'm like, I just want to see what happens here. But as you do this, you'll find that if you slow it down and slow your motion, you see more detail, more recognizability. So that's where 1/10 of a 15th of a second, it's just hard. But if I go to a second, a full second, and I pause a little and then move it, you start to see it. So you have more detail. And I like that a lot, just kind of just seeing things with a bit of that shake. I'm happy. That was another tip. I kind of going to go through a few of these tonight. Let's see how we're doing with the time. Make sure. Yeah. So twisting, think of a steering wheel. I encourage you. This is a fun one. Or spin art. How many people have ever done spin art as a kid? And that's what I always think of when I look at something like this. So twisting is fun and long exposure, just a little bit of drive of the car, subtle motion, something like icicles turned into this. So it's really like you don't know sometimes, you're curious, what's this going to do here? Or you can sometimes keep some things in the middle still, but then a little blur around. Flowers are so fun in so many ways, right? Or the glints on a railroad car or escalators. So I'm going to go through and pick up the face. Zooming, if you have a zoom lens, you're zooming either from tele to wide, which I tend to do more, or wide to tele. John says he does both. Or if you don't have a zoom, you can zoom with your feet and use a prime lens or a camera. But zooming adds a lot of energy. Show you a few zooms. Incense, beach chairs, really happy and exciting, or something more quiet like a beautiful sunset turns into almost a staccato tie-dye, like just because I'm zooming with a little jerkiness. So I zoom trees a lot. Like they get this one, it has like an aura, right? Or a marina the other day. Something like this place we're leading, we just announced the trip today back to Guanajuato, Mexico, near San Miguel de Allende. A city scene like this can turn into this, crazy kind of set of tonalities and shapes. So our architecture and nature, I hope I've given you that. Swirl is a little harder. We have an article. If you want a handout, you'll send me an email and I have a contact at the end. And we wrote an article a few years ago. But swirling, you're holding your lens and kind of twirling your camera so that the sensor's moving. It took me a little time to get this movement, but it can be really fun. Hope I've explained it well. I'm going to keep going. And then as I indicated before, our combo for John and I is just really long where we're holding still for part of it. And it looks like a multiple exposure, but it's one exposure, maybe 4 seconds. This was on a tripod, 2 seconds still, and then I zoom. And it's really playful. I just put this in. No one's seen this in the whole world, but I created it recently, and I like the feeling of mystery of the barn and kind of that time travel feel of back the shadows. So this is really fun. A lot of these are 4 or 5 seconds with some still. I'm going to always ask if we have questions and just,
Nope, we're good. We're
you
good.
know,
No questions, but so many. There was one from, I believe it was Donna. Let me see if I can find it. But basically, she said, she's thinking about all those places that because she travels a lot too. She wished that she had thought to use ICM. So I think that you're inspiring people to like, hey, put it in the back of your mind. I'm a traveler. The one that your city in the Mexico City, the buildings and all the colors, and I'm thinking, I should have done that in Cinque Terre. I should have done that.
can only go forward, right? There's so often I say, should have
Mhm.
done this, but we can only
Good.
go forward. And it is just another tool. I think it's a
But
tool to play with. Yeah.
yeah, and it's one of those things that, you've kind of put a little post-it for me of the next time you're traveling and you're in front of the scene, try it.
Yeah,
Try
like
it.
we'll often do the literal. I say
Mhm.
lose the literal, but of course I'll often, but then, okay, I've made a composition I really like here. We're not leaving it. Ooh, and often it's color or light or something. And it becomes obsessive, but you can play. And when you're alone, maybe in your hometown, not traveling, because I think, I'm a travel photographer and there's just kind of the space to relax and try things in your own trail that or park that you've been a million times. ICM, I do a lot of our work local, and I think it is because I am more quiet by myself. And the one thing I'll say is faster movements, smoother lines, and then slower movements, more detail, and then how smooth or jerky you are. And it's really about playing. But something like construction hoses become so pretty with color wash, color moving, or painted buildings. So I get drawn to color. I haven't done as much black and white in ICM. But here's this kind of this was the other day, and Diane is watching, and I'm so thankful for my friend Diane, who I met through photography. But we were at a building I love in Seattle, and it's very harsh, kind of blue and white. And I often don't do white. I'm like, white isn't great in ICM. It always gets so blocky. And so I think we tell ourselves a lot of stories and things, and it's like, break out of that, try it. Look, Lise, you made an ICM photo you love that is pretty there. And so architecture, we're grateful for a lot of it. And if you are able to seek light, color, shapes it really lends itself. I am not
Before
going to talk. Oh, go aahead, please.
I'm sorry, I was going to interrupt. Let me interrupt before you move on. There is a question I'm going to sneak in here. It's a question from Gail, and it's when using the Zoom technique. Do you turn the zoom for the entire open shutter or hold it in the beginning or at the end?
I like
And
that question. That's what I call the combo. If you have a long enough shutter, like usually at least a half a second or slower, a second. Yeah, that's some of those I just showed you, the combo of like the porch still for a while and it registers on the sensor and then you zoom. And I like that because it becomes very recognizable. I do that with architecture a lot and saying, how would these windows look zoom? And so yes, I encourage that. When you only are moving, it usually is more abstract and less recognizable, all equally lovely, perhaps. Thanks. Yeah.
thanks.
So I'm going to skip ahead. I think I only included 2 images of this, but panning moving subjects, it is to me impressionistic because of this creative blur. And there's a lot out there. So I cut ours out, but it is something we love to do and we practice in good places where there's movement and background and play with that and repetitive motion of trying to keep a subject very sharp with a blurred background. And I find using live view helps me lately. I can see what's coming, lock on the car, and it's a lot about, smoothness and follow through. But I would say these days, John and I like a lot of our pans that aren't tack sharp, like this one from Cuba, even though that often is technically, can you keep it? Some of the accidents or the things where you're following motion, but you have motion. It looks, it's fun. Sometimes with legs, you get ghosting and weird, but sometimes it just works, like this quiet image John created in our city, which is known for the rain, right? One I created many, many years ago. I had never heard of intentional camera movement at this time, but I remember probably trying to pan a longboat and liking what happened as a happy accident. But now I will purposely pan and zoom here. So I'm walking with the lion dancer and zooming. So I'm combining things. And we do that a lot these days. This is getting, just using both some motion and some zooming. The other thing you can do is if you are in a passenger mode and someone's driving safely, I encourage you to use your camera out the front window or the side window with slow shutter. You will have fun. I have done this both with my OM system camera and our phones, but you get images that feel like you're on the journey. And just because it's, a slow shutter, you'll have something sharp and this feeling of travel and motion. Or this is at the side of the window as we're going past some aspen. You can even do it walking, just watch where you're going. John created this image, and I thought it was a red fence on a beach. And look what he created it out of, a sign in Alaska. So it is very much losing the literal here. So I sometimes walk with a phone or a camera in that motion. So, I look for, as you've seen, things that have, just like you would with regular photography, interesting visual elements, but specifically metallic surfaces and lights and neon are super fun with this. And you can experiment at home. Like a lot of objects at home can, these are on this photo, this is those swimming noodles. You've ever seen the swimming noodles for sale at a gas station? And then I'm doing that. So, these are some places to maybe, think about in your own communities. We're all so scattered, but places that John and I have found particularly fun for this kind of playful motion photography. And holiday nights, this isn't the time, but, watching these, we enjoy holiday lights with it. Oh. I watched a great happiness hour. What was her name, Linda, who did the holiday night lights? I love it. Val, right? Yeah.
Bree Hoffman, who is in
Yeah.
this room.
So good. I enjoyed it. So mine, experiment with different movements sometime at the same place. That's some of that I've done. And then also, with shutter speeds. And some have, maybe you want to do things nobody knows what we're looking at. I like those. Like you have no idea. And do consider your phones as a really good tool. These are some of that. It is an amazing, liberating, fun way to play. I don't have time for multiple exposure, but I think of that as one thing to, urge you to consider. But these, the other day, I saw these for the first time. John did multiple exposure 2 different ways and made like a crisscross of a tapestry. And I thought, wow, right? So like, we live here near these tulip fields. So how do we do them a little different is something I view with your blue bonnets. But Emmy, we like multiple exposure. I do add lens babies in sometimes with the same techniques. And if you don't know what lens babies are, definitely look at their website. Very interesting optics for. And then the last thing is just through texture. This was through plastic tent. Have you ever seen those at events? The plastic, heavy plastic. I encourage you next time you're at an event, look at it because it does this fun distortion that can lead to impressionist or plastic white things. So I think I judged pretty well. You can take a photo of this, but here are some inspiring resources that I like online that truly delight me a lot. When I see what people are sharing in this realm, especially some of these groups. And here are some other people. I know that Beth's been on the happiness hour, and here's my wish list for Linda to bring others. But these are kind of some of my current favorites, including some people you may not have heard of. But definitely take a photo of this. Yeah.
I love Richard Martin. I just love him.
Mm.
Charles Needle, I've met. Yeah, there's some really wonderful names here. Art
And I
Wolf.
want you to share with me
Yeah.
people. If there's people that should be on this list, I would love to hear. What do you say, Linda? Yeah.
Oh, I was just say, yeah, there's my wish list is to have dinner with Art Wolf and Rick Steves. That would make me happy.
And I want to, I guess I can finish the PowerPoint, then I'll just stop sharing screen. But the way we offer, ways you might want to learn with us is, if you're here, which I know many of you have been on this photo journey with, or in this room have been inspiring to me on our photo walks as we do ICM. But we have a dedicated workshop coming up this summer for 4 days at one of the most favorite places where we took workshops for years. It used to be had a different name, but it's on Bucolic Island right near Seattle. And if that's of interest, you can find more on our website. But we do farms and marinas and beaches. And if you sign up and mention it and let me know through this, then I also want to give you a gift of an hour of free photo coaching, because before, after, during, But our trips are few and far between. But we just this week announced 2 of them with real dates and accepting both San Miguel de Allende and Northern Vietnam. So I encourage you, if travel is something you like and you want to consider in a small group of other creatives with a slow travel approach and time to get off the group thing and be doing what you want to do, I would love to talk to you, because we do some nice curated experiences. And that is, and then some privates. Happy to meet you where you're at. I would say we love I myself as a photographer had benefited from sharing my work with people I admire. And I think, we go through life and sharing and discussing images that are important to us, that can lead to a lot of good ideas and breakthroughs. So if we can help you, talk to us. We have a newsletter. And I, for the first time ever, have a QR code that you should be able to take a picture of and get on the newsletter. I don't know. My intern created it. So I think I will now stop sharing, Linda. Is that good?
Yeah, that'd be great. I was
Such
scrolling here and I'm still not seeing any questions. So if you guys have any questions, type faster.
This is the
But
time.
yes, this is the time, but I will certainly share with you the chat so that you can see
Oh, thank
the
you.
very nice comments in this room. That's the one thing about, I'm going to say this, we've been doing this for a long time. We're over 4 years now. And the people in this room are as talented, they're not doing photography full time. Some of them are, but they are just as talented and creative. But this is a room where people have found our people, and so bringing you in and for you to just kind of ping some new ideas, like, well, maybe they thought about it. And I'm seeing that in the chat, and I'm kind of giggling because I recognize some of these people that are making those comments. So I told you so kind of person. So ladies, I told you so. So this is really encouraging, Lisa.
Hmm.
It's creative. The first time I tried ICM, it was challenging. Oh my goodness. It was very, very difficult for me. My brain is more, I'm a literal person. So I love Impressionist work, but I'm a literal person. And I worked at that ICM and I worked at the ICM and finally I got one and went, oh my, it took
Hmm.
me a while, but I finally got one that I loved.
What was
And
it of? What was the subject or topic?
it's okay. This is it.
Uh,
This is okay. Can you see it? It's my
oh,
ink.
it's there. You were made one. Oh, water, beautiful water. Yeah.
So it's but it the word you used challenging, yes, absolutely. But the word that you used that was like, yep, check the box for me, liberating.
Hmm.
And it allows us an opportunity to get out and play and have no agenda. And when you actually come up with something you really like, it's pretty awesome. So thank you for the ideas that you've shared with this group. This was a lovely presentation, and it was nice to meet you. And I so appreciate your time. You're coming in here for, an hour to talk to a bunch of people you don't know. You don't know me, and this was wonderful. So I'm very excited to add this to the Happiness Hour. It's a part of the project, the YouTube channel. So I hope other people find it and reach out to you. And I so appreciate it. All
I
right.
appreciate you. And I have been sharing the happiness hour with a lot of people. You are a gem, a best kept gem. And like I said, I think you have it, but I'll throw it in the chat now.
Yeah.
If you want a handout from a longer workshop on this topic that I have, I would be happy to share it with you. It's a PDF. I just email me and then let me know and we can make that happen because that might reinforce some things. So I'll just send you my email so you have it. But
Yep.
I'm grateful to you, Linda, and to all the people who show up on this Wednesday night to watch.
So
Lisa,
anybody,
I have a question.
Oh, Damon, I
okay.
hear your voice.
This is
Yeah.
Damon. Yeah. Um, it seems like sort of one of the basic challenges of doing ICM is getting to a low enough level of light that you can do the longer exposures. So, what are the easiest, the most accessible ways to be able to cut light down without? I don't know if you have to attach an ND filter or what are the easiest ways to do that?
It really is. I think for years, John and I were like, oh, polarizer is good enough. I can get to a 10th. And then I start like in the last year or two religiously using my 3-stop often or a 6, and it just gets you right into the realm of you can go, down to 2, and it just somehow the colors and I'm not fighting it as much. So even though I know you're Olympus, the one in camera, you can't do many at once. It's a slower thing. So there are variables and I keep trying to love my variable. I have one where you can put it on and you turn it and it goes from 3 to 10 stop. And many people I work with, Diane, who's on this call, does it to great effect. So and they are reasonable. If you get K&F filters made by photographers, it's not like, because the optics don't have, you're doing blur. So I would say getting either a variable or a 3-stop. And, rather than just a polarizing filter will get you slower.
Thank you.
At least so you can do a half a second in bright daylight or 1 second.
So with that, I'm going to close out this session. Thank you so much, Lisa. It was good to meet you. All right. Next
Happy
week.
anniversary on number 200 next week.
Yes.
I watch many of behind the scenes, but I'm going to try to be more a part of your community to buzz in sometimes. Thank you.
I would love that. All right. And next week, we celebrate our 200th session, and Christy Adams will be here to share her presentation, Traveling Iceland's Ring Road by Camper Van. Until next time, go out and create something beautiful, and I hope that we see you again soon.